I spent 660 days analyzing every tease for the next Mass Effect, and came up with one theory that answers every question on this list. This one theory answers where the next game will take place, how our game-breaking choices in Mass Effect 3 can be solved, whether this N7 insignia means Shepard is coming back, and even who the likely villain and protagonist in the next game will be. All my answers are evidence-based guesses, but just a quick disclaimer that this theory should not be taken as expectations for the next game. It's currently just a theory. Before we dive into my setting and timeline guesses, let's first set the scene for everything I'm about to discuss. The main teases we're about to dive into include N7 Day illustrations, trailers, pieces of concept art, things from the Mass Effect comics and books, N7 Day blog posts, and of course, tweets by franchise director Mike Gamble. Every part of this theory is based on a tease from these lists, but the heart of the theory's main points are tied to either N7 Day hints or Gamble tweets. And that's because franchise director Gamble confirmed multiple times that every tease so far is intentional. Like this tweet from last year, where he confirmed the team spent days crafting the secrets hidden in the Game Awards trailer that features Liara. So just keep in mind that everything we've been teased with so far is most likely extremely intentional and relevant to how the next Mass Effect is going to look. Alright, let's dive straight into it with the first setting hint that dropped on N7 Day 2022. This illustration of what's likely Ilium's skyline. In Mass Effect 2, the rectangular pink lighting style and general shape of buildings from Ilium matches this art the best. And of course, Ilium is in the Milky Way, so that's one confirmed location in that galaxy. But even though this is from a Milky Way planet, the Mass Effect team carefully hid symbols within this piece to send us a message. There are 4 symbols sprinkled throughout the piece, equally divided with 2 from the trilogy and 2 from Andromeda. These 2 are from Kadara Port in Andromeda, and these are Omega and Cerberus symbols, which were specific to the trilogy. I believe this was an intentional choice to show that both the trilogy and Andromeda will play an equal part in the next Mass Effect, which does confuse the timeline of the next game, but more on that in a bit. To hammer home both galaxies being important for the next game, the team hid the codename SFX-5 on a nearby building. Given the original project codename for Mass Effect was SFX, this is likely a message to us fans that the game, at least for now, is internally being called Mass Effect 5. And of course, we can't forget Gamble confirming that showing both galaxies in the 2020 trailer was intentional. So if Andromeda will be included in the next Mass Effect story, does that cement the date of the next game being set in the 2800s? Thus dooming multiple trilogy favorites to be dead and gone? I'm not so sure, particularly because of a couple teaser appearances by a calibration-loving Turian. At the end of the 2020 trailer, we see a few characters in the background. I honestly didn't want to believe it, probably because I couldn't bring myself to hope, but I finally decided that the character carefully placed here is Garrus. When I compared his profile in Mass Effect 3 to this character's, it matches up a little too well. Coupled with this character in the 2023 art also resembling Garrus, there's enough to convince me that the Mass Effect team hasn't decided to go for a large time jump, because a Turian's maximum lifespan is approximately 120 to 150 years old. Since Andromeda takes place 600 plus years after Mass Effect 3, Garrus should have been long dead, and yet we see him being teased. A few theories out there suggest that Garrus could be back but has hopped to Andromeda using cryosleep, thus making the date likely in the 2800s, but there's a huge reason as to why that's unlikely. All the planetside art in the teases is from the Milky Way, like this one that features a Solar Electronics storefront. Solar Electronics is an established Milky Way corporation, and these elegantly shaped buildings feature the pink lighting scheme of many Asari planets. When I hopped into photo mode and visited the Asari's home planet of Thessia, it matched up pretty well, minus the smoke and angry reapers. As a side note, if this is Thessia, then it's most likely now facing some type of air pollution, since these characters are wearing masks of some kind, which would make the likely timeline for the next Mass Effect after the Reaper War, since we didn't need to wear masks on Thessia during the war. This increases the chances that what we've seen from Garrus is in the Milky Way, but we'll get to which planet he's visiting later on. Something fascinating about this illustration is what looks like teleportation beams coming out of the buildings, which we've seen before when Shepard beamed up from Earth to the Citadel. It likely wasn't active on Thessia in Mass Effect 3 because of the Reaper's assault, but just keep in mind for now that instantaneous teleportation is canon, which will be very relevant later. For now, let's move on to another hint about the date for the next game that's hidden in the 2022 relay tease. In the bottom corner of the relay footage, a string of text includes a date that is cunningly November 7th, something 90. The Mass Effect team hilariously left out the crucial first 2 digits, but at least we got something. Even though we haven't got a ton of information to work with, let's see if we can finalize a setting and date. The setting at this point seems to be heavily Milky Way focused, so I'm going to guess for now that the Milky Way will be the setting. And based on that, since Garrus has been shown a couple times now, I'd say the date would have to be 2190, since he most likely hasn't jumped to Andromeda based on the art we've seen, and he wouldn't survive to 2290 and beyond due to his limited Turian lifespan. A few more teases that back up the date being 2190 are a few glimpses of Liara. In the 2020 trailer, we glimpse Liara's face, which some have pointed out might be wrinklier than usual, indicating a large time jump. However, when comparing this to Liara smiling in the Citadel DLC, we can see the same smile wrinkles. And again, with Garrus being in the background who can't live beyond 150, I doubt this is Liara 600 plus years older. Another confirmation of the date being 2190 is Liara's new outfit, which the CG artist Blake Sullivan shared on ArtStation. The coloring mainly matches Liara's Mass Effect 3 outfit, except for the additions of black, which are reminiscent of her mother, Matriarch Benezia. To me, this means that Liara's character arc is going to mirror her mother's darker tendencies, which we had already seen the start of in Mass Effect 2.
Have you faced an Asari commando unit before? Few humans have.
Have you faced an Asari commando unit before? Few humans have.
However, her newly teased outfit isn't fully black like Benezia's, which I think implies she hasn't hit the matriarch stage yet. This most likely means that Liara's only in her second Asari life stage of matron, which as a side note, could be the final role that Gamble teased for her in this tweet. Liara Tassoni, Doctor, Shadow Broker, and the redacted role of matron. Her being a matron would also mesh with the date being 2190, since it'd only be 4 years after the Reaper War. The last Liara hint that helps us determine the setting is her remarks about the new relay.
Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate. I can see it in different lights. That's what I was predicting.
When she says, the Council will be furious, it indicates the relay is being built in the Milky Way, where the Citadel Council resides. I also think this relay is being built by the Systems Alliance using Cerberus technology, which I won't go into detail here, but I'll link the relay breakdown I made a few months ago in the description. So all the teases we've gone over so far, to me, show the Milky Way as the setting, at least to start, and the date of the next game being 2190. I know that with the mayhem caused by the vastly differing Mass Effect 3 endings, that this seems like an impossibility, but it's actually much more plausible than you think, which we'll get to later. Now, the most confusing question after establishing this setting and time period is why bother showing the Andromeda Galaxy at all, if the most relevant plot threads there happened after a 600 plus year time jump? Surprisingly, the answer to this is most likely hidden in the geth teases from 2020 and 2021. In the 2020 trailer, we come across an Alderson disk, which is an artificial megastructure used to capture the energy of a star in order to fulfill large energy-heavy functions. In Mass Effect 2, Legion specifically mentions that the geth were building this in order for all geth to share memories, which would ultimately lead to them achieving consciousness.
We told you the geth are building our future.
But you didn't say what it is.
A megastructure. The closest analog you have is a Dyson sphere. When completed, we will all upload to it.
What good will that do?
All memories will be shared. All perspectives will be unified. We gain intelligence by sharing thoughts, but we do not have adequate hardware for all of us to share at once. No geth will be alone when it is done.
The Mass Effect team, including this disc, tells me that the geth's evolution will be a huge part of the next Mass Effect. As a quick aside, while showing this disc, we also mysteriously heard the line, Arcturus Station, unknown vessel approaching, we need first contact protocols. We'll get to the significance of this line later on when discussing the villains for the next game. For now, let's focus on the Geth's role, because they're the ones that'll likely connect both galaxies' plot threads in the next game. And to see how, we have to examine the Geth crater released on N7 Day 2021. The crater itself is a perfect match to a comic panel from Mass Effect Discovery, prompting us to look at what the Geth were up to in that specific comic. Interestingly, the major discovery in this comic was that the Geth crafted a faster-than-light telescope made from 3 mass relays using strange technology that allowed them to find planets well beyond where anyone else was looking. This telescope was called the Colas Array, and it's very important to note that it was pointing directly at the Andromeda galaxy. However, the Quarian that discovered the array emphasized that the Geth were not interested in the planets within that galaxy. This begs the questions: where were the Geth really looking, and what did they find? To answer these elusive questions, and to discover how the Milky Way and Andromeda will connect, we have to examine some concept art for the next game that likely tells us what these Geth found. When the 2022 relay first dropped, fans dove deep into the file's metadata and discovered that the project name of the next Mass Effect was Bowie, which might not seem like a big deal, except when you couple this realization with a few concept art pieces that we technically weren't supposed to know about. Marco Iazzi tagged multiple concept art illustrations with the codename Bowie, showing that it was drawn for the next Mass Effect. And there's 2 pieces in particular that are very eye-opening for how the Milky Way and Andromeda will connect. The first shows a glowing star explosion with stars inside of it, and the second shows a starship moving towards a star explosion with the title Diving In. To explain why a starship would enter an exploding star, we have to understand what happens after a star blows up. Once certain stars reach their version of old age, they explode in what's called a supernova, and a percentage of those exploded stars form black holes. In today's realm of physics, these black holes can theoretically be crossed, and again, very theoretically, be used to reach other galaxies in what's known as wormholes or Einstein-Rosen bridges. This would explain why the Mass Effect team wanted specific concept art of a starship diving into a glowing star about to explode. Relating this back to the Colas Array Geth, I think that they found a wormhole using their FTL telescope, similar to Interstellar, where NASA found viable worlds through their nearby wormhole. Here's the absolute kicker though, that solidifies wormholes in the realm of Mass Effect specifically. In modern day physics, there's 2 major problems with wormhole travel via 2 connecting black holes. The first is that after crossing a black hole's event horizon, you have to avoid its crushing gravitational pull by traveling faster than the speed of light. And the second is that in order for the wormhole to be stable, there needs to be some source of negative energy. In the Mass Effect universe though, EZO allows for faster than light travel. And as for the negative energy requirement, the Scourge from Mass Effect Andromeda has basically been described as a charged absence, i.e. negative energy. So basically, in order for the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies to connect, you need a black hole, EZO to travel fast, and some of the Scourge. And conveniently, the Mass Effect team stuck a black hole in the middle of the Helios cluster that has EZO and the Scourge required for stable wormhole travel. They literally set up wormhole travel back to the Milky Way galaxy while developing Mass Effect Andromeda. But that's not even the craziest part. The craziest part is that the Mass Effect team also chose to make this black hole a Kerr black hole, which HowStuffWorks.com explains basically allows for time travel to either the past or the future. Remember how the date for the next game is probably 2190? Well, if the next game is going to do what I think they will, the Andromeda crew is going to use this black hole as a wormhole to reach the Milky Way and be blasted back in time to the date 2190. And the best part is, that's not even an unhinged take, because I'm fairly certain that Ryder has already been teased in the Milky Way, standing right next to good old Garrus. When the Game Awards trailer first dropped, Gamble tweeted at his fellow BioWare coworker that the 3 companions in the background were guessable by fans. This is hopefully Garrus, and if the backwards time travel theory is possible, then I think that it's likely that this is Callow, who piloted the Tempest, and the person in the middle is Ryder. When examining the Solarian's armor, it has a reddish hue, similar to Callow's outfit, and the reflective helmet, overall posture, and height of the middle figure fits Ryder really well. If these 2 Tempest members are standing next to Garrus on a Milky Way planet, that'd confirm that backwards time travel is possible in the Mass Effect universe. So maybe the Andromeda crew does get back to the Milky Way using a time travel wormhole, but with the setting likely being the Milky Way, will wormholes be a thing there too? There's actually a few major teases that indicate it will, which were carefully hidden in the 2020 trailer. During this section of the trailer, there are multiple voices overlaid in quick succession, while showing the local cluster, which is the home cluster of Earth. Whatever these voices are discussing most likely affects the Milky Way specifically, because they showed the local cluster. Each layered voice can be broken up into 5 distinct phrases, which I'll play one by one. I believe the first voice says, "Emitted probe in A." And voice 2 says, "Anomaly readings all across space."
Anomaly readings all across space. Anomaly readings all across space.
Voice 3 is the hardest to interpret, so my interpretation will most likely change, but for now, I hear, "It beats the heart." Voice 4 sounds like, "They do match." Voice 5 probably says, "Upon an unknown horizon." I think voices 3 and 4 connect to Shepard's return, so I'll tackle that later. For now, let's dive into how what we heard most likely indicates wormholes are present in the Milky Way. Voice 2 mentions anomalies across space, which could refer to the rapid formation of black holes across the Milky Way. As to why I believe that, I'll let Tali explain.
Any idea what's destabilizing the sun?
If I had to guess, I'd say that it was dark energy affecting the interior of the star. The effect is similar to when stars blow off mass to enter a red giant phase, but haste from sun is far too young for this to be natural.
Dark energy speeds up the aging of stars, which makes it faster for them to reach the supernova and black hole stages. And in Mass Effect 3, the Crucible most likely released a wave of dark energy across the entire Milky Way, which must have increased the growth of certain stars viable to turn into black holes. This would then explain Voice 1, as these black holes turned wormholes would then have probes emitted into them to determine where they lead. Again, similar to what happened in Interstellar. I think Voice 5 confirms this, because they mention an unknown horizon, which could refer to the event horizon of a black hole leading to parts unknown until it's been crossed. Like I mentioned earlier, instantaneous travel from one place to another is already canon for short distances, but maybe in the next Mass Effect, they're going to take this teleportation style travel to the next level. If we connect all these teases back to the Geth crater that led us to the Geth's FTL telescope, I believe that the Colas Array Geth were most likely the first Milky Way race to discover a wormhole that led to other planets in a different galaxy. This will help explain why there's an Angara in the Milky Way pointing angrily at the mysterious Geth wearing clothes, but we'll get to that when we tackle the likely villains in the next game. For now, I feel confident in predicting that these Geth most likely found, went through, and returned from a wormhole. One of Gamble's more cryptic tweets imply that we'd be shocked about where we'd be traveling in the next game. So if the next game does feature travel to multiple galaxies via wormholes, I'd say that it'd warrant plenty of shock. Now, most of the teases we've gone over so far link the Milky Way and Andromeda both being relevant in the next Mass Effect. But there's one major problem with that, especially if the next game takes place in the Milky Way, only 4 years after the events of Mass Effect 3. And that is, how in the world will any of the major choices we made in Mass Effect 3 be resolved? For that answer, we have to look at a specific page in a book about BioWare's secrets. In the BioWare book on stories and secrets from 25 years of game development, it included a page near the end about the next Mass Effect. And in one of the paragraphs, it mentions that the next game will get back to its franchise signature of choices and consequences. Now, with everything we've seen thus far, I assume that this has to include consequences for the choices we've already made in the trilogy and Andromeda. And to back that assumption up, here's 4 tweets by the franchise director of the next Mass Effect, Mike Gamble. When asked if Liara is happy following the events of Mass Effect 3, Gamble replied, "Happy? I mean, depends." And he also altered a graphic on returning characters to only Conrad Werner, cryptically implying that Conrad is both most likely and least likely to return in the next game. These 2 tweets to me imply that Liara's happiness and whether Conrad will make an appearance in the next game depends on what choices each player individually made in past games. Liara's happiness would be vastly different if she lost Shepard as a friend versus as a lover, which is up to each player's romance decision. And Conrad might not even be alive beyond the events of Mass Effect 3, depending on your interactions with him throughout the trilogy. Add those tweets to the 2 Gamble tweets from October this year, we can see a definite pattern. Gamble tweeted about the BioWare team liking multiple endings, and replied that if those endings are happy depends on, what I believe, is our individual choices. With these tweets, coupled with the promise in the BioWare 25 book, there's enough evidence for me to believe that the franchise's signature choice and consequence will indeed return in the next Mass Effect. As to where we see this in the teases for the next game, look no further than the conversation Liara has with a geth about the new relay. If there's going to be consequences in the next game for our Mass Effect 3 choices, then it's important to examine how Liara could be heard speaking to a geth in the relay tease. That's because, specifically for players that chose the destroy ending, or who chose to destroy the geth on Rannoch, this conversation should be an impossibility. However, if my previous theory about the Colas array geth is correct, then it would allow the Mass Effect team to circumvent those specific choices. Let's look at the Geth crater once again to find out how. Over here is a group of 4 characters moving towards the crater, who, based on the coloring of each character, I believe is Garrus, Ryder, who I'm hoping is Rex, and who I'm confident is Liara. Since she's walking towards a gigantic Geth-shaped crater, and is then heard in the subsequent tease speaking with a Geth, I assume that she's most likely speaking with the Geth we've already associated with the crater. Basically, Liara's probably speaking with one of the Colas array Geth that knew about a wormhole leading to parts unknown. This is likely because the Colas array was built before the events of Mass Effect 3, so the Geth that used the telescope could have easily gone through a wormhole they found, thus avoiding the Geth-destroying choices during the Reaper War. And if this Geth did escape, then it'd make sense why we hear their voice as synthetic noises instead of understandable speech in the relay tease. In the games, Legion was the only Geth platform we could understand because he was 11 times more intelligent than the average Geth, allowing him to speak. But if we make certain choices on Rannoch, Legion sacrifices himself to upload Reaper code to the Geth Collective, which increases the intelligence of all Geth, thus allowing them all to speak with us. So if Liara can understand the unknown Geth, but we can't, I'm going to theorize that this individual Geth hasn't received Legion's Reaper code, indicating that they weren't around during the events of Mass Effect 3, making their escape through a wormhole more likely. In this way, the garbled synthetic noises of the mysterious Geth is likely a representation of our choices mattering in the next game, since the Mass Effect team specifically teased a Geth that avoided the Geth-destroying choices we could have made. But of course, the Colas array Geth avoiding our Geth-specific choices is one thing. But what about the other major choices we made in Mass Effect 3? Like the choices that could have led to the Quarians' destruction on Rannoch, or the Krogan's eventual destruction by sabotaging the genophage cure on Tuchanka? Well, I have a wild theory that those choices will be solved by one of the more subtle teases we heard in the 2020 trailer. During the Game Awards trailer, there's a moment where the camera pans away and we hear the words, "Arc 6 is away, Godspeed." Gamble confirmed that this was an intentional choice that mirrored the Godspeed phrase when the first arcs of the Andromeda Initiative launched. When I first heard this, I didn't think much beyond Arc 6, potentially referring to the Kila Sia or an unknown 6th arc from the Initiative. Now though, I think the crucial part about this line is that it precedes the next section of the trailer, which has audio from the Reaper War. Basically, I think that this line about Arc 6 was a specific choice by the Mass Effect team to highlight that the arcs were sent before the Reaper War began, which got me thinking about how the arcs could actually be a way to circumvent the race-destroying choices we made during the Reaper War, like the potential destruction of the Quarians and the Krogan. Since the initiative launched before the Reaper War, a portion of Quarians and Krogan that went with them avoided our potentially fatal choices on Rannoch and Tuchanka. And if backwards time travel from Andromeda to the Milky Way is possible, then the Quarian arc, if they ever make it to the Helios cluster, could replace the Quarians potentially lost on Rannoch. Conveniently, the Krogans that joined the initiative had the highest resistance to the genophage out of all the Krogan clans, which allows them to reproduce at a rate 4,000% higher than an average Milky Way Krogan, according to Nakmor-Kesh. So these highly reproductive Krogan could replace the infertile Krogan in the Milky Way if they took the Andromeda wormhole too. In these ways, the Quarians and Krogan from the initiative could replace the Quarians and Krogan potentially lost due to player choice in Mass Effect 3. This would provide massive consequences for race-destroying choices, because an interaction with a Krogan who received the genophage cure versus an initiative Krogan who only had an increased fertility rate because they left the Milky Way would be extremely different. Now obviously, this solution hasn't actually been teased in the next game. It's simply a solution I'm guessing could happen if player choice is honored in a return to the Milky Way. That being said, I think the arcs were actually a genius plan to solve our contradicting choices because of the insane plan the Mass Effect team has teased to bring Shepard back for one more story. Out of all the contradicting choices we could have made in Mass Effect 3, by far, the biggest one is whether Shepard is alive or not before the credits roll. And what's absolutely absurd is that we've been teased with Shepard's return in the next Mass Effect. But there's no way that this contradiction can be solved. Or is there? All the teases about Shepard's return are in the 2020 trailer, with the first being a confirmation of Liara and crew visiting Alkera. It's confirmed to be Alkera because of the icy atmosphere, 3 moons, and because the local cluster is visible in the sky above Alkera in both the trailer and when we visit there in Mass Effect 2. Also, Liara can breathe on Alkera despite its methane atmosphere, most likely because Asari can breathe methane, confirmed in an obscure planet description from Mass Effect 3. In the trailer, after Liara lands on Alkera, she removes an N7 insignia from a helmet and brushes snow off it with the familiarity of knowing who it belongs to. And the only N7 that would warrant this familiar thumb brush would be Shepard. But now we have to ask ourselves, why is Liara on Alkera in the first place? Alkera's only significance to Shepard is when they originally died there at the start of Mass Effect 2. So by showing us Alkera now, I firmly believe that the message is that Shepard is once again going to defy death and return in the next game. However, this section of the trailer is likely not showing us the recovery of our Shepard, because Shepard's second death was nearby Earth. It's probably showing us the recovery of a Shepard in a parallel universe who still hasn't been recovered from Alkera, because the Alkera in the trailer definitely isn't the one from our universe. And I think this unbelievable theory is proven by the N7 helmet piece from the trailer existing in the first place. Within our universe, there's only 2 things this trailer could be showing, since the helmet could only be on Alkera after Shepard fell to its surface. It's either showing us time travel to the past or the original recovery of Shepard. But here's the fun part. Gamble denied this showing a recreation of Shepard's recovery at the beginning of Mass Effect 2, and the Dead Reapers on Alkera rule out time travel to the past, since there were none there back when Shepard first died. So to me, this leaves only one option. This isn't an Alkera we know. To explain this, I'll use the popular physics theory called the many worlds interpretation, which actually connects to the wormhole theory from earlier. The many worlds interpretation assumes that there are universes that exist in the same space and time as our own, but in parallel. And the craziest part is that modern-day physicists believe that these parallel universes can be visited by jumping into wormholes formed by black holes. So what I think we're seeing in the trailer is a parallel universe which Liara hopped to using a wormhole, and she's in the process of recovering the Shepard that died there in order to return to our universe and bring that new Shepard back to life, probably using the Lazarus Project. The returning part is most likely shown at the end of the trailer, where a distorted version of the local cluster is shown, probably representing our known universe that is plagued by anomalies. So when the trailer clued us in to anomalies across space and unknown horizons, I believe it meant to get us thinking about potential wormholes, but not just the ones that lead to different galaxies, but also the type that lead to parallel universes. I personally think that when Voice 4 says they do match, that it's a clue to indicate that a parallel universe had an event match of Shepard's death on Alkera. I know this sounds crazy, but I go over this way more in depth in my full trailer breakdown, including how the tease of Feynman plays a factor into this explanation. So check that out if you need more evidence to believe this part of the theory. Now, when I first thought up this fantastically unbelievable theory, I immediately came up with two major questions. First, if wormholes are a thing, how will we traverse them in the next game? And second, why bother recovering Shepard in such a convoluted way when they could just canonize Perfect Destroy where Shepard's already alive? I think everything we've discussed so far provides the answers to both those questions. First, how can these wormholes be traversed? I think the new human-made relay provides the answer. Gamble directed our attention to where specifically the new relay led, because as one fan pointed out, all the relays from the Reaper War were repaired. So why build a new relay in the first place? I think the answer to where it leads lies in the audio before Liara's conversation was deciphered. Here, listen to the droning audio on the original relay file. I think this is meant to imitate the sounds of a black hole, which sounds like this. And as mentioned earlier, black holes that form Einstein-Rosen bridges can lead to parallel universes and to other parts of our known universe, depending on which type of wormhole you go through. This relay might also be referred to as a dock, because the ships that go through these wormholes would need a place to return to and detox, so to speak, before heading off to familiar Milky Way territory. I think that the Mudskipper we've been shown is one of these detoxable vehicles that might have been specifically made to visit parts unknown. If this is true, my current guess for the Mudskipper's name is Multi-Dimensional Skipper, i.e. a ship used to traverse different dimensions, but that's purely a wild guess for now. Anyway, on to the one question I couldn't wrap my head around for the longest time. Why bother recovering a Shepard from a parallel universe when other, simpler options are available? The answer is probably pretty simple. From all the teases, art, and tweets I've seen so far, the one resounding message the Mass Effect team is trying to send us is that our choices are going to matter. And the biggest choice we made to date is which ending we chose. And of course, linked to that choice, whether our Shepard lived or died. So I think, based on the recovery of a parallel universe Shepard, they're attempting to mirror the Shepard that some of us might have lost, similar to the mirrored Quarians and Krogan from earlier. And because they're going to such lengths to recover one character, I believe that Shepard is going to be the protagonist of the next Mass Effect. Let's break down how Shepard's return could look, depending on which ending you chose in Mass Effect 3. In Perfect Destroy, Shepard lives, but in every other ending, including just normal Destroy, Shepard dies. I think that what we see in the trailer applies to all these endings, where the next game will feature a parallel version of Shepard that isn't our original from the trilogy. Theoretically, those who chose Control, Synthesis, or Normal Destroy would play as an alternate Shepard, while those who chose Perfect Destroy would play as their original Shepard after some type of recovery period. In this way, the Mass Effect team can honor that ultimate choice we all made in Mass Effect 3, while still allowing us to play as Shepard in the new game. The one problem, though, I have with my own solution is that I personally wouldn't want to play as a random alternate Shepard. I would much rather play as my Shepard from the trilogy. But does that mean I'd be forced to choose Perfect Destroy? Again, I don't have the answer to this based on the teases we've gotten so far, but if I had to guess, I'd wager that a mission from Mass Effect Andromeda holds the key as to how our Shepard could return without recovering their original body. In a mission on Havarl, an Angaran held an artifact from their previous life and remembered that past life's memories. And we already know that souls are a major concept discussed multiple times throughout all the games, with Legion asking if he has a soul being the most iconic moment on that subject. With this in mind, maybe every Shepard other than the one from Perfect Destroy will undergo reincarnation after holding a previous heirloom, thus retaining the memories our original Shepard made. In this way, when new fans to the franchise play the next game, they could start fresh with the parallel universe Shepard with no reincarnation attached, but the trilogy players could have their original Shepard back in some capacity. Now, with all this theorizing in mind, I've penciled in Shepard as the protagonist in the next game. But the protagonist conversation is actually more complicated than you might think, so I'll tackle that last. For now, it's finally time to tackle all the teases from last year's N7 Day, which holds quite a few hints about the next game's plot, including the potential villains. Before we get to the recent teases though, don't forget to subscribe to catch my upcoming N7 Day stream, which will definitely have this unhinged level of theorizing for whatever tease comes our way next. Hope to see you there. As to the unhinged theorizing taking place here, just a heads up that all my guesses on the 2023 teases are most likely going to change after this upcoming N7 Day, because each N7 Day hint thus far has helped explain the previous one. That being said, I'll still use mainly evidence-based guesses that connect to what I've explained so far to explain the N7 Day 2023 shenanigans. First up is the banner found on the 2023 blog post. This supposedly looks like it has nothing, but there is a shadow of what looks like a ship at the bottom edge, as well as what could be the shadow of a mass relay on the side. I've ruled out the bottom shadow being the Tempest at the very least, but it could be the Normandy SR-1 or SR-2. Most likely though, it's the shadow of our new ship, which Gamble hinted was his favorite ship to date. This shadow definitely doesn't fit the SFX ship seen beneath the Geth crater, but as a random aside, I think that this ship is an N7 exclusive ship because of its coloring. Who knows, maybe this SFX ship is for the use of Shepard. The one character I definitely don't think it's for though is the new N7, because I'm fairly certain they're a bad guy in the next game. Here's why. Once the final intercepted packet was received by fans last year, we finally got to see the identity of the new N7, except their head turn told us basically nothing. It was everything else that did. In the last packet, we saw words like warning and breach alongside Contact Systems Alliance, and these negative words were coupled with showing us the N7. I take this to mean that the N7 we're seeing is not allied with the Systems Alliance, but rather betraying them. Two other signs that I believe show this N7 out to be evil are their ridiculously high collar and the choice of music when we finally see who they are. Most high collars across popular media are used for villainous characters, hence why tvtropes.org labeled this trend the high collar of doom. As to the evil choice in music, listen to how it plays out when overlaid onto Shepard's first introduction. combining the music while seeing a good guy like Shepard felt incredibly off, which gives me the impression that this is not supposed to represent the player, but rather a more villain-like figure. I personally don't think we can accurately determine who this N7 villain is until we get more teasers, but based on what Gamble tweeted about them, we could make a solid guess. On Twitter, a poster asked Gamble if the new N7 is a person or a robot/AI, and good old crafty Gamble replied with, "What's a person?" I think this tweet was meant to jog our memory about a similar line in the book Mass Effect Initiation. The line this resembles is after Sammy, an integratable AI, describes his purpose to the main character, Cora. He says, "Without organics, I would have no purpose. In order to be a person, I need people." Cora then goes on to ask herself if Sammy even qualified as a person. With this in mind, I think Gamble might be hinting that this N7 might be a fully functioning AI, and a rogue one to boot. I specifically think the N7 is rogue because of a sly hint in Initiation about who runs the Systems Alliance. Near the end of the book, the leader of the Andromeda Initiative, Gian Garson, speaks to Cora about the true purpose of the initiative, which is funded by a mysterious individual or group called the Benefactor. Garson reveals that the Andromeda Initiative's true purpose was to create a fully integratable AI, i.e., creating Sam, which is kind of hilarious considering the initials of the Andromeda Initiative is AI. Coincidence? I think not. Garson went on to explain that the entirety of the initiative is being led by an invisible conductor who is also pulling the strings of the Systems Alliance, and that their true purpose is to obtain Sam, who is a fully integratable AI. After reading all this, I can only conclude that the Benefactor is the invisible conductor pulling the strings of both the initiative and the Systems Alliance, since they were the one who funded the initiative in the first place. Garson later died in the events of Andromeda, probably because she knew too much, and I believe it was the Benefactor who ordered her to be killed. To me, this sets the Benefactor up as one of the prime villains from Andromeda, whose identity was left on a cliffhanger. And after seeing this new N7, who could be a rogue AI, I think that at the very least, they have a connection to the Benefactor, if not being the Benefactor themselves. Obviously though, the Benefactor being an AI and wanting to obtain a fully integratable AI is very shaky logic, so I'll table both the N7's identity and who the Benefactor is for a future video. Regardless of whether or not the N7 is an AI though, last year's teaser still begs the question of why they breached the Alliance's security in the first place. The answer to that might be the mystifying phrase of Epsilon Oculon Nebula shown with the final intercepted packet. The only tweet we received from Gamble that could give us any hint as to what this phrase means was this one, where he said that the tease from last year and the relay tease might be connected. And the only thing that I could possibly think of that connects those two teasers is if the Epsilon Oculon Nebula phrase is actually a signal sequence in order to activate the newly made relay. Initiation includes a brief section on how Alec Ryder deciphered the signal sequence that activated the very first relay humanity discovered. So I believe that the N7 stripe in the bottom left corner of the relay tease, which is incredibly hard to see, is meant to show the N7 observing the relay, and in last year's tease, that same N7 most likely stole the signal sequence of Epsilon Oculon Nebula in order to activate it for their own nefarious purposes. Which, if the relay does what I think it does, would allow this rogue N7 to instantly teleport themselves to another part of our known universe, or maybe even to a different universe altogether. Even if this connection to the relay is completely disproven following this upcoming N7 day, I do think it's likely the new N7 is a newly built evil AI. And that's because if our choices from Mass Effect 3 are taken into account, then the synthesis ending would render most villains from the Milky Way useless. The synthesis ending caused organics and synthetics to, allegedly, fully understand one another, which limits who could be a villain if the next game does take place in the Milky Way. Except, that is, for newly built synthetics, like the new N7, who wouldn't have been blasted with the "we're all best buddies" DNA. As to who else I think are likely villains in the next game, let's examine the mystery table near the Geth clothes to find out. This code art probably has a lot of hidden details, but the most relevant hints to the villain discussion are the Geth, Asari, Angara, and mystery person near the back. I'm fairly certain that the Asari is Liara, and this Geth platform is probably one of the Geth who built the Colas Array telescope from earlier. As a quick refresher, Liara was most likely looking for the Geth who built the array, and then the next year, she was heard speaking with what was most likely one of the Geth she found. So this Geth we see that's suddenly deciding to wear clothes is probably one of these newfangled platforms that's been through a wormhole to parts unknown. As to the Angaran, I had joked in a previous video that this could be Jal, and I know other Angarans have worn this particular outfit in Andromeda, but I really do think this is Jal now, and that's because of who I think this mystery person is. I'm fairly confident that the middle character from the 2020 trailer was Ryder, and once again, I think we're seeing Ryder here too. Comparing the mystery person to this Ryder picture, the helmet matches pretty well, but they are wearing an unfamiliar outfit in the new art tease. And as mentioned before, the Andromeda crew could have gone back in time to 2190 and landed in the Milky Way, making these two interacting with Liara possible. Regardless of these two being Ryder and Jal though, the major point in this illustration that brings clarity on who the villains in the next Mass Effect could be is the Angara's angry posture towards the Geth. If this Angara is Jal, we know one particular thing that angered him near the end of Mass Effect Andromeda, which was the revelation that the Angarans were manufactured for some unknown purpose by a mysterious race called the Jardan. The Jardan were the ones who created Remtech, a strange technology that only Ryder could interface with because of Sam. With this in mind, the connection between the angry Angaran and the Geth pictured here most likely relates to the strange technology the Geth used to form the FTL telescope. The Discovery comic that featured the telescope released the same year as Mass Effect Andromeda, so it's likely that the writers chose to add many Andromeda connections, which could make the use of Remtech in the Milky Way a real possibility. But there's actually a much stronger connection between the Milky Way and the Jardan than we think, and the secret to that connection is hidden in Jal's smile. Jal's teeth, as well as all Angarans, are fairly uneven, which is a strange design choice for the Mass Effect team to make, until we think about why their teeth would be like this. Since the Jardan created the Angara, they most likely made them in their own likeness. And when I went sleuthing for who the mysterious Jardan were, I stumbled across this ancient Angaran artifact, which has a head structure very much like a Prothean's. Taking this one step further, I analyzed Javik's teeth, and found that the front two teeth and canines mirror Jal's really well too. And it wasn't just Angaran teeth, but the Ket, who were sister species to the Angara, also have similar looking teeth to Javik. The most logical explanation for this similarity to me is that the Angara, and thus the Ket, were most likely made by the Protheans, which would then make the Jardan Prothean, which is backed up by yet another Gamble tweet. Gamble added fuel to this theory by replying to a tweet that implied Remtech resembled Prothean tech with, or maybe it's ... which I personally think can be completed with, or maybe it's both, which would imply that the technology we see here is both Prothean and Jardan, i.e., the Jardan are Prothean. Other Prothean similarities to Remtech include the Prothean archives on Mars and Javik's memory shard. However, because director Addison remarked on the distinct differences between Prothean tech and Remtech, I think that the Jardan are Prothean, but with a twist. I think the Jardan are a group of Protheans that dabbled with either synthetic enhancements or artificial intelligence. The Remtech found all over the Helios cluster requires both an organic and synthetic aspect to operate, and since the Remtech was made by the Jardan, then this implies that the Jardan themselves are both organic and synthetic. This plot thread of blurring the line between organics and synthetics was not only addressed in the synthesis ending of Mass Effect 3, but also with Ryder's transformation near the end of Mass Effect Andromeda. Throughout the game, Ryder and Sam worked together to interface with Remtech vaults, but near the end of the game, Ryder interfaced with the Jardan technology alone, without the use of Sam. Based on Ryder's journey thus far, I think that the theme of organics becoming more like synthetics is far from over, and we'll probably see more of the same in the next Mass Effect. So because of this organic synthetic plot thread most likely being integral to the next game's plot, my way too early prediction for who the villains are in the next game are the Jardaan. With all of the equal Milky Way and Andromeda teases being shown to us, they'd be the perfect villains since they have a connection to both galaxies, especially if they're Prothean. Based on the teases, the main reason I think the Jardaan could be likely villains is because the Angara in this tease is angrily pointing at the geth that Liara is with. If this geth went through a wormhole that made contact with the Jardaan in some way, then it'd make sense why the Angara doesn't like them. This might connect way back to the first geth tease in the 2020 trailer of the Alderson disc, where we heard the line, "Unknown vessel is approaching, we need first contact protocols." Maybe this line held a convoluted meaning of the geth making first contact with an unknown race in the next game, which based on how angry the Angara looks, could be the Jardaan. So with all this theorizing, my villain prediction, which again is heavily subject to change, are newly built synthetics like the new N7, which might include the Benefactor, and the Jardaan, who are potentially an organic synthetic version of Protheans. With newly built synthetics and the Jardaan as the villains, there'd be a dual set of villains, similar to the dual villains of Cerberus and the Reapers in Mass Effect 3. Now I've covered every relevant tease for the next Mass Effect, except for one. The one Gamble tweet that keeps me awake at 3 AM just thinking about what it could mean. And this is that tweet. Referencing last year's N7 Day teases, Gamble tagged his fellow BioWare coworker and said, "They haven't found the other part, the one I was afraid of them finding. But with under 2 weeks to this upcoming N7 Day to go, I might have found the thing we missed." I don't know if it's accurate, but it is something. In the N7 Coats illustration, the elusive thing we missed might have to do with the reflections on the ground. Every reflection on this floor is fairly accurate. This person mid-walk, the Solarian and human, the Angara, and even the 2 drinks on the table. Most of them match really well, except the reflection of who I think is Ryder. And if we reference Gamble's tweet again, he said they haven't found the other part. I'm wondering if maybe this other reflection, which doesn't match Ryder's, is the part we've been missing. And if this is the case, I'm wondering if somehow this reflection is supposed to represent Shepard's. I know, a huge stretch, but we've come this far, so bear with me for a second. Every single tease I've covered thus far seems to indicate that closure for both the Milky Way and Andromeda plotlines are going to be a huge key to the next game. So if that's true, and if my dual villain guess is correct, then it would make sense to also have dual protagonists with both Ryder and Shepard. Andromeda already featured both Ryder twins as playable, at least for a brief time. And in the latest BioWare release, the Veilguard also features a dual character creator, although we don't yet know if we'll control both Rook and our former Inquisitor. Regardless, if this trend continues, then maybe we'll be seeing another dual character creator in the next Mass Effect, featuring a couple former protagonists that might finally be coming home. So with that, my final prediction for the protagonists of the next game is both Shepard and Ryder. With all the above predictions finalized before N7 Day 2024, my final theory can be summed up with one thought. I think that the next Mass Effect will return to its franchise signature of choice and consequence, provide closure for both Shepard and Ryder, and act as a launchpad for future sequels in other galaxies with the use of wormholes. I'll be referencing this specific theory, which I'm calling the continuation theory, during my N7 Day stream. But I do want to add a huge warning to this. I am definitely not expecting the next Mass Effect to just be a closure story. It'll probably also include a bunch of new characters and places we haven't seen yet. So just keep in mind that every guess here is based on 0.01% of what the Mass Effect team has shown us thus far. This should not be used as expectations for the next game. The one hint I wasn't able to figure out in time for this video was the significance of the relay in the 2020 trailer, so I'll leave that for a future video. Regardless of how accurate this theory is though, I hope at the very least we'll get closure on what happened with Shepard. I don't think Shepard should have died at the end, and with the potential tease of Shepard's return, I'm hoping that the Mass Effect team finally realized that Shepard's death defeated the entire point of the trilogy. To see why I think so, watch this video next on just that. See you there.